Lord, we want to appreciate you for the far that you've taken us since we began this festival. Lord, we want to appreciate for gathering us here for a common purpose to pursue the research activities for this nation. Lord, we pray that you bless this day. May you package like what we had on Monday and on Tuesday and Wednesday. Lord, we pray for all the participants. We pray for good health. We pray for a good concentration for the better of this nation. For we pray this believing in your name.
Thank you, Robert. Today's session, we have a very tight program, and we request you to keep time when coming back to the halls. And our first session will be discussing issues to do with global challenges and sustainable solutions. And at this point, I wish to invite our moderator for the session, Professor Amelia Buxa, to come and lead the session. Welcome, Prof.
Good morning. Good morning again. Although we are going to discuss challenges, you should cheer up because we're going to come up with some solutions. I want to take this opportunity to welcome you to this session this morning. I'll be a moderator in the next 1 hour, and I will ask you to be very indulged in this discussion. My name is Professor Maria Bokutsa Onyango. I'm a professor of horticulture at Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology. But this morning, I am your moderator. So the session, as you can see from your programs, is talking about global challenges. Global challenges and sustainable solutions. So if you have challenges, it's always good to come up with some solutions. So the goal of this session is to discuss issues such as climate change, public health, and food security, showcasing research initiatives aimed at finding sustainable solutions to these complex problems. So that's why we are here to identify them and come up with solutions. So all of us are asked to be indulged in one way or another. So how we'll proceed is that we have a keynote speaker, and then we have 6 panelists. To save time, maybe I'll ask all of them to come in front, the keynote speaker, and the panelists. Please have a seat, starting with the keynote speaker. We see as I introduce them, they should be sitting here. Just come and sit in front too. Please come, my keynote speaker, please come and sit here. So as they come, we are going to have 10 minutes of presentation from our keynote speaker. And our keynote speaker this morning on global challenges and sustainable solutions is Professor Raphael Munavu. I'll briefly introduce him, then he can come and take the stage. Professor Raphael Munavu, is the chairman of CONSA, Technopolis Development Authority, TDA. He's a professor emeritus in chemistry at the University of Nairobi and a director at the National Commission for Science, Technology, and Innovation, NACOSTI. He previously served as the chairman of the Presidential Working Party and Education Reform in Kenya. He was also chairman of the Kenya National Academy of Sciences, and he was also a chancellor of Laikipia University and commissioner in the Commission on Revenue Allocation. He's a fellow of African Academy of Sciences and also a fellow of Kenya National Academy of Sciences. So he's also a council member, a governing council member of African Academy of Sciences. There's a long list I've left behind, but that will start for now. I want to take this opportunity to welcome you all, and let's welcome our keynote speaker, Professor Raphael Munavu, with a clap. Let's clap for him as he comes. Professor. So, Professor, you have 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. You are welcome. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Good morning, everybody. I hope you are delighted as I am. I'm delighted because I'm facing all of you, and when I look at you, I look at your eyes, I look at the uniform that you have. I see some schools which look familiar to me, and then I say, the future of Kenya will be in good hands. The future of Africa will be in good hands. And the global future, the future of human race, is in your hands. And for now, I'm just talking to the young people because they are the ones that my eyes can see. They don't see what's this, they only see young people. I am very delighted to be with you. I'm very delighted to join you. I'm very delighted that NRF is doing this inaugural engagement. And this engagement is very critical with Young Scientists Kenya, a group that I have worked with many years ago. And therefore, I am very delighted to be with you to just share some reflections, some thoughts about the challenges that we face as human beings, so that once we understand the challenges we face and we understand why we face those challenges, then we can craft strategies on how to solve those problems as we move forward. So it's very, very interesting, very exciting. And the activities that I find with a lot of us, human beings and human entities, is what do we do? What is our life? How can we reflect on our life? And human beings have basic needs. And therefore, everything that you do, every activity that you take, is trying to assist human beings to achieve their basic needs for food, for safety, happiness. All of those are part of basic needs that we need. Generally, globally, there are ways in which human needs are assessed. And the United Nations Development Program categorizes nations globally on the basis of what they call the Human Development Index, HDI. So you look at a country and you are able to say not how much it is developed, but how much the human capital within the country is developed. And there are three critical areas in which UNDP looks at human development. They look at, for example, health. So they look at how healthy is the citizenry in this country. And generally, the basis of measuring health, there are many other criteria. But the one that is used in this categorization is life expectancy. So that is one. The other one that is used very often is you can have everything that you need in this world. But you need to be able, as a nation, you can have natural resources, including human beings. But there is only one way in which you can categorize and add value to the resources to create wealth for your country. And that is by using knowledge, using know-how. And therefore, the second category or criteria of determining human development is how educated is that country. And there are many ways of assessing it and so forth. That is extremely important. And then there is a third one, criteria. Are these people poor? What is the rank in terms of poverty? Can the citizenry feed themselves? And if they can, how much do they spend per day on food, per person? And basically, most important is what is the overall income of the nation. So the three categories: income levels, the knowledge utilization through education, extremely important, and then life expectancy. That criteria is used to rank countries from number 1 all the way to the bottom. I will not tell you where Kenya ranks in terms of HDI. The only reason I won't tell you is because I know you have computers and gadgets. You can Google it. Just Google HDI for Kenya and where it ranks. And if I was going to give you a tutorial, I would say, tell me which is the country that ranks the highest in terms of human development and why. And most of the countries that rank very high in Human Development Index are countries that have sat down and they have reflected on the causes of poverty in their country. Analysis of why are we poor? Where did the rain begin beating us? What resources do we have? What capacity, what knowledge do we have to convert these resources into the wealth of the nation? So basically, that is what development is all about. And that's something that you should please think about as we move forward. The major challenge to development is really poverty. And there are many constraints to ensuring that we minimize poverty in any country. There are ways in which, as a nation, we must ask ourselves, and your generation, if it is true that our HDI in Kenya is very low, why is it that low? And what can we do? What can we do to ensure that it is increased? What strategies can we use? And the strategies can be grouped in various categories. If you have some challenges, the challenges can be local, they can be communal, and therefore the solution can be generated by public participation, stakeholder participation locally. It can be national. And if we have some national challenges, then who do you think but global challenges? And the key global challenges are challenges that come from the way the human beings now interact with each other. And it is very important for us to realize that currently people are traveling from here to America, from here to Australia and back again and so forth. And you'll hear, if you pass through the airport, you are checked, where were you? Was there some outbreak and you are coming here and so on? Movement. the mobility of human beings has increased. So issues of health is very important in terms of how do we respond to these matters. There are also issues on that we really have very little to do with. We may have caused them, but in terms of responding to them, we can't do it as a small silo. It has to be a global response. For example, climate change. Yes. Who brought the issues of climate change, adaptation, and so on? We are the cause of it because we are generating energy, we are doing this and so on. But by the end of the day, when we talk about climate, you can't say it is just climate in the village because it spreads across and covers the whole world. And therefore, we must think of a way in which we handle these challenges which are global. Generally, what nations do is, there is a term that I like to use, and I would like for you to repeat it. Declaration, say declaration, declaration of intent. Declaration of intent is stating your dream about where you want to be. So for example, in Kenya at one time, a few years ago, we said we have Vision 2030. This is where we want to be by 2030. In Africa, there was a declaration. This is where Africa should be by 2063. This is AU. And then globally, there was a very interesting declaration which took account of the global needs. And that is something they call the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. There are about 17 of them. And this is development activities that are going to be addressing the challenges that we face globally. And what is our dream? How do we expect to achieve them? And by the way, if you look at them, if you haven't looked, I would urge you to do it, because there is nothing very new. Because when you are poor, you can't eat. So reduce poverty. Can you get the second? Guess the second one? Ensure that people have got food. Guess the third one? Ensure people can walk, they have quality health, and so on. And of course, issues of climate change are also there. I think they are all about 17 goals, and I think climate is about 13 and 14. That is the one that will be now handled globally. How do you handle global challenges? Global challenges can only be handled by ensuring that we have very real collaboration between nations, collaboration between you and I, and ensuring that we focus on value addition to our natural resources, that we are concerned about the quality of health of our people, and that we use knowledge, we use research to find out diagnosis of the disease that we have, the challenges that we have. What is the diagnosis? That is research. That is knowledge. And that knowledge lies with all of us here. If somebody cuts your head, and by the way, I don't know how many of you know that some of the most distinguished scientific and medical innovations originated from Africa. and they are still domiciled here, but we don't exploit them a lot. How many of you know that there are some ladies in Kisii who will split your head, repair your brain and put your head back, skull? Can it be done? Yes, it is done. How many of you know that one of the major drugs for childhood leukemia, for cancer, is a drug that was isolated and developed here? You go to Kerio Valley, the whole Kerio Valley, there are flowers of a plant called Catharanthus roseas, rose all along the road. That is the one that gives the drug internationally and so forth. And our people knew this, including Micheka knew this. But yeah, you are welcome. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned that, but no, it's okay. So basically, we all have challenges, but we have solutions. And the solution lies with you. The solution lies with research, development of knowledge, so that we use this knowledge to be able to look at the resources that we have and ask ourselves, how do we transform these resources into the goods and services that our country needs? Let us resolve, don't say it, but in your mind, that in a few years, 4 years, we should quietly say, no export of natural resources. Let us get the natural resources and process them and develop them here in our country, but we live in a world. So the products that come from those resources, we don't mind, we can export them. But at least the value addition should be done here. We shouldn't export natural resources and so on to be processed elsewhere. I am very delighted to be with you. I look at your eyes, I look at your face, and I say, Kenya is on the correct trajectory. The world is in the correct trajectory. And please, quietly, the responsibility you have is major. Because if you look at demographics, in a few years down the line, 10, 15 years down the line, when you guys will be standing here, I'm addressing the younger guys, you will be talking about 30% of global population. You will be part of that. And therefore, mine is to wish you well, to thank you, and to say that we need this engagement, and NRF to thank you very much. Please ensure that this is a national issue. It should be a national activity all the time. I think it's extreme, so that we engage and create a framework.
Thank you very much, Professor Raphael Munavu, for that inspiring keynote address. Let us give Professor Munavu two factorial clap means you clap twice and once. 2 factorial clap. Okay. Okay, you start 1, 2, then 1. Start. Thank you. So now we are moving to panel discussion, but before we do that, we want to say that what he has said is to make us start thinking, all of us. The panel members will share the ideas, and then talk to the...
Thank you, Vanessa. I'm being informed the students who are here, there's some judging taking place. You required slowly. You've been blessed by Prof. Munavu. Do you feel happy? Can you clap for him? Will you take forward the message that he's given to you? Thank you. So slowly you can move, you go and continue the activities. Prof.
We'll miss you youngsters, but we will share the information later. So, as I was saying, we are going to move to the panel discussion. Let's give the young people to move. As they move, maybe I can contextualize what Professor Munavu has said as we just to pass time as they go. So in terms of global challenges, the United Nations has put them in the following categories. Population, he talked about it. Poverty and inequality, Professor talked about it. Food and agriculture, fresh water, forest depletion, energy, climate change, health and water, health and air pollution, and you can see whatever he talked is covered in the global challenges that have been identified by the United Nations. So without much ado, let us move to the next session. We have four panelists. To start with, the best place to start is I'll give each panelist to give your name and your institution for now, and just briefly, why are you interested in the challenges? Maybe mention one challenge, but don't go into the details. This is just introduction. Your name, your institution, what you do, and how it's related to the global challenges. We'll start from my friend, Professor Barr, and then we come this way. You introduce yourself, say your name properly, and then you tell us where you come from, and then what you do, what's your interest in the global challenges. But don't go into the details. The actual activities will come after you have introduced yourself. So take 1 minute to introduce yourself so that we move from there. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so thank you, moderator. My name is Gideon Obare. I'm a professor of agricultural economics based in Egerton University, but currently the director of Tegemeo Institute of Agriculture Policy and Development. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Antonina Mutoro, and I'm an associate research scientist at the African Population and Health Research Center. Within the organization, we aim to transform lives in Africa through research. And one of the things that we do is to generate evidence. We also have a component of research-related capacity strengthening. And then we also engage policymakers with an aim to inform action in health and development. I am a nutritionist, and I'll focus more on the nutrition and food systems component. Thank you.
Morning. Good morning, members. My name is Professor Monica Musheromuna. I'm currently teaching at Kenyatta University in the Department of Environmental Science and Education. My background is in soil fertility, integrated soil fertility management, and a lot of interest in climate change. But as a department, we are looking at issues of environmental health, issues of pollution, issues of ensuring that our natural resources are managed, we are harnessing them and using them in a sustainable way. Thank you.
Good morning. Okay, sorry. Yes, my name is Guy Yoroba. I am a researcher at the International Livestock Research Institute, based here at Nairobi, our main campus. My background is livestock economics, dryland, pastoralism. Anything to do with dryland is my area of work. Currently, I'm directing a research program called Jamil Observatory for Food Security Early Action, which is essentially a research that works on food security issues within the countries in the Horn of Africa, particularly focusing on the dryland areas. Thank you.
So thank you for introducing yourself. But the last panelist to introduce, can you please introduce yourself again? Because I couldn't hear your name, so I'm sure the panel didn't. Just make sure it's loud enough.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, yes, my name is Guyo Malicha Roba. I am a scientist at International Livestock Research Institute. Is that enough? Okay.
It's okay now. I'll prefer to stand here for ease of moderation. So now we want to dive deep into the discussions. Now you know who we have and where they come from. I'll start with you, Robert. Oba. Okay. So I want you to tell the audience and participants in just maybe 1 or 2 minutes, what are some of the interesting initiatives you have been involved in to address any of the challenges that the keynote speaker identified? You have just 2 minutes, so don't go to all of them, just the key ones that you have been involved in, any initiatives, because he told us we have to give solutions. So start giving some of your solutions. Just give 1 or 2 examples. Pick 1 or 2 of the global challenge. Say what initiatives you have. You have just 2 minutes. 1 or 2 minutes, please. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, at International Livestock Research Institute, we do a number of things, but I think since you asked me a personal question on what I'm engaged in, I'm currently leading a research program on food security in the Horn of Africa. Essentially, the research has to do with trying to understand why are we facing drought responses in the same style for 50 years, 40 years. Science around early warning has evolved, but the response has not really evolved with that science in terms of timeliness, in terms of using those data. So the research program look at a number of issues. One is around this quality of data. Data question is an important question, but then how do you have an appropriate data that is understandable by people, that is trusted by a livestock keeper or a farmer in the village? And trying to understand how do you improve on triggering, because sometimes our drought responses comes very late. Every time we're on emergency mode, and it's very expensive to respond in emergency situation. So our entire agenda is how do you do something we call anticipatory action? How do you take an early action? And that the factor of taking an early action is a number of things. One is on data question. How do we organize data? How do we have better metrics and better and timely delivery of data? So some of my PhD students and postdocs are working on these questions over a long time. The second area is around financing early action. Sometimes you have an early warning, but then you don't have financing that goes in terms of responding. If you come from dryland area where I come from, sometimes you have a drought bulletin that says you do this at this point in time. But if you have no money, drought cannot stand and wait for you. In 2 months, 3 months is a different story, and then you come to emergency. So some of the areas that we're working on is that, and coordinating early action. How do you coordinate drought responses from different parts? Some of the social scientists in the program are working on that. But then lastly is, how do you match or synergize the informal early warning with the formal early warning? Currently, we are very heavy with the formal early warning, which is contemporary warning that's organized from here and delivered to the people. But then people don't trust this. So some of 2 or 3 PhD students from the University of Edinburgh is working on this particular question, trying to understand how do you co-produce an early warning that is both acceptable and secondly understood by people for them to take an action around drought responses.
Great, thank you, Professor. Answer the same question from your context. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So there are many professors here. Professor from KU, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think what I can share, in a nutshell, as Kenyatta University, we are looking at a number of those challenges because we are in different fields. But generally, we have what we call the Chadaria innovation. This has really come up very well because we have realized that we are doing a lot of research, but we are not having a lot of innovators. So that is one of the challenges as Kenyatta University. We are trying to capitalize, encouraging our students as they undertake research to be also innovators and entrepreneurs, that the things they have innovated, they can be able to grow them take them to the market and be able to sell them. And at a personal level, I'm involved with integrated soil fertility because we know that soil is the base for everything in terms of our food security, in terms of our health, and I have been involved in looking at natural ways that we can be able to use to harness our soils. So I'm very much involved in the issues of agroecology, ensuring that we are using natural things other than the inorganic fertilizers and also inorganic pesticides to ensure that we conserve our environment. We have safe food as well as enough food. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Mutoro?
Okay, so within APHRC, we have a unit called the Nutrition and Food Systems, and within this unit,
Can you hear from the back? Mnasikia?
Okay, let me take that again. So within APHRC, we have a unit called Nutrition and Food Systems, and one of the things that we aim to do within this unit is to make food systems sustainable, equitable, and resilient. Within our unit, we have an initiative called the Zero Hunger Initiative, which came about after we won a Food Vision Prize, which is a competition that's hosted by the Rockefeller Foundation. So this initiative has enabled us to conduct research with an aim to improve the food security situation in Kenya and Africa. And we aim to do this using different strategies. The first one is the promotion of agroecological farming. And for this, we've been able to work with 21 community organized groups in informal settlements in Nairobi, so specifically Korogosho and Viwandani. And we've been able to support these groups to set up urban farms, which they've used as a source of livelihood, and they've also used the farms as a learning platform for the general community on issues around nutrition and food production. We also want to reduce food waste because there is emerging evidence that there's a lot of food waste in Africa and across the globe, and this food could potentially be redistributed to vulnerable populations which are food insecure. So we are trying to generate evidence around the acceptability of rescued food, and also we are trying to set up a system, a food rescue and redistribution system, so that food that can potentially be wasted can be utilized by vulnerable populations. Apart from that, within the initiative, we also have a social movement, which basically aims to advocate for social and policy changes within the food system space. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mutoro. I want to ask Professor Obare to give us his part. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. At Egerton University, we are interested and focused in one of these challenges that the keynote speaker has talked about, food security and sustainable agriculture. We do have an array of various projects that really address this area, particularly in terms of breeding varieties that are adaptable to various climate areas. And the focus here is we do have biotechnology labs that have engaged in breeding through gene editing or genomics. I think that is what it's called. We are also undertaking research on water and sanitation, environmental conservation, environmental and natural resource conservation. We do have centers that are focused in conducting research in those areas. We are also very much focused on undertaking policy research, policy in the sense that we do evaluate government interventions and the kind of impact that those interventions will have. And therefore, we do generate evidence, so this evidence then is used to inform policy-making process. And when you combine all that, you can see that as a university, we are also then contributing to solutions to the global challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Obare. Now, the keynote speaker, we have transformed him into a panelist, and he told us that we need to come up with solutions. I just to ask him to give us 1 or 2 examples of what we're involved in terms of addressing 1 or 2 of the challenges. Professor Munavu.
If you can allow me, I'm currently in Konza Technopolis, and Konza Technopolis is really a 2030 national vision to catalyze development, entrepreneurship within the country, and most important, especially in the area of energy, is working on what we are calling the greening system, tree planting and using renewable energy and so forth. That's something that as Konza we are focusing on. But Konza really believes that our future lies on contribution, not only from research and innovations, but commercialization. You do the research, you do innovations, but you don't hide them under the table. You must put them on top of the table. And therefore, we are developing a science hub where at least people, young people, can come and incubate their ideas. We are promoting that. Konza is also promoting ICT and data usage, and that is why we have the Jitume projects. In all the counties and wards in Kenya, we are distributing hubs and so on. And I just want to invite you, because there is a very important international activity, global activity taking place in Konza this coming September 23rd to 27th. And all of you are invited. And it will be an international center of science technology parks, an association of science and technology parks, which is domiciled in Malaga in Spain. But for the first time in Africa, it is coming here. So everybody globally will be in Konza during those periods to discuss issues of science parks. And it's very important as all of us to realize that really a science park includes incubation centers, which I have indicated, includes ways in which you can have a facility to do certain things, but most important is bringing people together, innovators, academia, and so on, and work together to find solutions. You don't find solution alone. You work together jointly. You come up with the solution, whether it is in Egerton or wherever, but by the end of the day, somebody has to implement that solution. So basically, that is what Konza is trying to do, and we are ready to collaborate and to work with everybody, and we have already engaged NRF so that we begin to work together.
Thank you very much, Professor Munavu. The second round of questions is this. For each one of you, identify one of the global challenges, and just one, and maybe explain to the participants how have you turned this challenge into an opportunity with regard to solving that for researchers, for students, for all actors in the space trying to solve this. Just one, and just give us briefly. Some of you have maybe answered in one or another, but just pick one identify the challenge and tell us how you are turning that into an opportunity. Because they say every challenge is an opportunity in waiting. So let us pick one challenge and tell us what you as a person or your institution is doing. So I'll start from Professor Bare, please.
Okay, maybe I can just talk about a program that has been going on for a while now. It is supported, actually, maybe two, but then we can just combine them. What we are doing is we are contributing to the sustainable agriculture and agribusiness management. So we do have a center called SESAM, Center of Excellence in Sustainable Agriculture and Agribusiness Management. So what we do here is we conduct research in agricultural economics and agribusiness management. We do have students across the region that come, and they are trained on the best on topical practices and knowledge, topical knowledge. The students also are supported to undertake their projects. The project that they undertake, they do conduct those projects in collaboration with the end users of the knowledge that is then generated within the university. The end users are then farmers. So the students interact with the farmers provide possibly potential solutions as they see them. The students are then supposed to introduce them to new management techniques, knowledge, and so on. And then the farmer and the students kind of follow this project through until fruition. There is also support to students with their innovation. If they do have an idea, that idea is incubated until fruition. And if it is one that promises potential, then the project tries to support them in terms of the resources that they may need. And then we do also have another center that is involved in breeding for varieties that are, as I said, adaptable to the various conditions and also...
Thank you, Prof. I think I said one, but thank you for sharing. We can talk more, but I see you are rich in providing solutions. Just give us, Dr. Mutoro, just one opportunity, but thank you for what you are saying. I hope you have mentioned the COELEB. Is it one of them? COELEB is an institution I know in Egerton. It's also doing some good work. So there's a lot of them there. I'm just saying there are many. What you have said is okay. Mutoro, please. Thank you.
So mine ties in closely with what Professor Barre has talked about, and it's around involvement of communities and youth in research, because through this engagement, then you get to have a good understanding of some of the challenges that they're experiencing from actual needs. And this way, then the communities are able to own whatever challenges and solutions that they have, and this is also likely to enhance the sustainability of whatever interventions they're proposing. In this case, one of the things that we've been actively doing is engaging communities on issues around the right to food, so providing them information on the right to food and what it means to be food secure. And through this, we hope that communities will then be able to advocate for themselves when it comes to issues around food security and also participate in the policy-making process. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Professor Muna, briefly.
Thank you. I think one of the initiatives I would want to share is when it comes to issues of food security and environmental conservation. And what we have been doing is that as researchers, we have been taking our projects to the ground. So we have like experiments within the community. Either we get a farmer or we go to a public school or a hospital. We set our experiments there as a learning process. So we are able to train the students in the schools. We are also able to train the local communities. And out of that, we have realized that there is very high adoption, because then you are taking them through the stages, they are able to see it. So we are not just giving results, but they are able to see what we have done, and they are able to pick the best option because they are able to see that, in addition to the incubation of these technologies that our students are getting out of their research. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Muna. Dr. Roba?
Okay, thank you very much. I think we, in ILRI, we work on so many things, but I think the one which is interesting right now is the livestock, climate, and environment. We exist in this part of the world where livestock play a very important role in terms of providing, animal-based protein. But I think the same animal is also blamed for contributing huge amount of methane into the atmosphere and then contributing to, climatic issues that we have. This has really polarized the debate, and there's a strong duality between people in the north and those in the south. So, but then, interestingly, the opportunity here that we're working on is the data. There's really no data in the south to show our carbon footprint from livestock. There's enough data in the north to show the carbon footprint of the intensive production system. So if you are frequent people in COP, the climate summits, every time you go to the negotiation table, we have no data to table to show our own contribution or lack of contribution to the climatic issue. So at ILRI, there's a Mazingira Center, which is a center of excellence for collecting methane and doing different kind of research, including also trying to see the trade-off between the methane production, the backyard biogas, to extract some of the, to trade on contribution. So this research is now in, I think, in 5th or 6th year. We're now taking it back to the community to see in an extensive production system like pastoral system, what does the carbon, contribution look like? What is the carbon sequestration within the production system? So we have a number of, masters and PhD students and a number of, collaborators on this particular question. And then the end game is actually, how do we contribute data sets and metrics that we can put on the table to show in an extensive production system, which is basically a free-range production system, this is what the carbon contribution will look like. And this really is a factor of feed and feed combinations. So this is, I think, one of the few centers in the region that is building that data and evidence so that in future COP, when we go to COP29 and the rest, we have something to put on the table as a contribution or lack of contribution on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Keynote speaker, allow me to skip you for now. I'll come back to you later. Professor, let me go back to the panelists, other panelists, and I want you just to let us know, let the panel, the participants and those who are here know that what collaborations, because our keynote speaker said we cannot work alone, and there's as famous African, sometimes they say Chinese proverb or Japanese, they say if you want to go far, you work with others. If you want to go fast, you walk alone. But you want to go far, not fast. So I want each one of us to tell us one of your key collaborations or partners you're working with in these particular initiatives that are helping to solve one of the global, just say many of the key partners. So I'll start with you, Robert, as we go back. Tell us just one of the key collaborators or partners that you value that help you achieve your initiative that you're involved in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think largely in ILRI we do actual research, which basically is a research that feeds into some action on the ground. So we're very purposeful in the co-production ethos, which means we are very deliberate with the end user, which is one of the key stakeholders. If it's about semi-intensive, intensive livestock production, then we work with the dairy farmers. In my case, I work a lot with the pastoralists in the north and in Somalia, Ethiopia, and part of the Horn. But then a lot of research usually happen in a space where a number of stakeholders collaborate. So we work with the International Institute around research, national universities. Actually, I work with around 5 universities in Kenya: Masinde Muliro University, Garissa University, University of Nairobi, Laikipia, and Turkana University, around the concept around what we call the Dryland Futures Academy. We want to have an academy for capacity building around some of these issues in the long run, and universities are very essential in terms of changing curriculum or replacing curriculum or having short courses and etc. And then, of course, we work with national programs, which is basically government programs. They ask us, we have this project funded by World Bank or African Development Bank, but then the non-lending side, which is basically the knowledge, is very weak. So we collaborate with them on supporting them to produce evidence. So it's varied stakeholders, it's very extensive list, but that's how we work. Thank you.
Excellent. Professor Mona?
Okay, thank you. I think we are also working with a broad spectrum of stakeholders and collaborators, depending on what we are doing. But our main are the end users, the local communities. We have really, the university has really, the research department has really geared us to do that, because that is something that we have not been doing. So that whatever we are doing, we are thinking about the end user. And as we do the research, then we involve them. We are also working a lot with community-based organizations, having in mind that our extension is not very good now in the government, but the CBOs, the NGOs really come in play to support us, since we are not always in the field. Then the others is the policymakers. We are also working with the county governments, because we've realized that whatever initiatives we may come up with, they may not go far if the county governments don't own them. So we are intentionally working with county governments so that they can be able to own the research that we are doing, and they can be able to adopt it and be able to use it in their counties. We are also working with a lot of donors in this. And the government of Kenya is also one of our major donors in the research that we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mona. Dr. Mutoro?
So within the work that we do at APHRC and as an organization at large, we are embracing the use of a systemic approach, because we appreciate the fact that we are just one piece in a very large puzzle, and you do not have all the answers. So we actively seek engagement with other experts within the different research areas that you are working on. In the food systems work that we do, we actively engage policymakers, including ministries such as the Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Health, because we appreciate the fact that we need policies to create an enabling environment and also to come up with sustainable implementation strategies. Apart from that, we also actively engage communities because we believe they have the answers, and with communities, we work together with them to co-create interventions. And then apart from that, we also work with different funding agencies, local, regional, and international research institutions, as well as civil society organizations working in different spaces. So we have experts on environment, climate, and health who we actively engage. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Professor Obara.
Yeah, I think I can relate with what my fellow panelists have said. We do have a cross-spectrum of partners and collaborators. The academia, universities, let's say, across the continents, US, Europe, and Asia. When it comes to the continent, we do also have collaboration across the region, and also with the research networks that are involved in agriculture, specifically the African Policy Research Institute, that is focused on conducting policy research. We are also involved in partnership with the CGR centers, depending on the kind of research that is being done. The World Bank is also supporting us in conducting research, certain researches, as I said, the Center of Excellence in Agriculture and Agribusiness Management. That is a project that is essentially supported by the World Bank. Locally, we do have the government, obviously, the county governments. We are working together in partnership in trying to address some of the challenges that they face. And at the national level, obviously, the government as well, and the private sector as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing collaboration. Our keynote speaker, Professor Munavu, I want us to tell us, collaboration, you said is important. They have attested to the fact that they are also working in collaboration. But we know that there are many challenges in partnerships. I want you to tell us what are the main two key principles we can use to ensure we sustain our partnerships for a long time, because sometimes you see people disagree as a normal thing. What are some of the two things that we can do to ensure that our partnerships are long-lasting and sustainable, Prof. Munavu?
I think one of the most important things is to ensure that you have an MOU which is legally binding, and that you have resources available, and then you have human capacity to ensure that the partnership and collaboration is really sustained in a sustainable manner. That to me is extremely important. And what we have done at Konza is we have realized that we need to be able to be facilitative. So for example, we have the Open University anchored at Konza. We have the Kenya Advanced Institute of Science and Technology anchored there. And really what we are doing is we are incentivizing. It has to be a win-win. And you have to have that activity engaging so that it's not you being the beneficiary only, but it's everybody else who is participating to be a beneficiary.
Thank you so much. This session was supposed to be 1 hour. We started at 9. It's now 9:58. I will want to be allowed a few minutes to make sure I allow for some questions because we are told to keep time. So I have only 2 minutes, but we might go beyond, slightly a few minutes beyond. If I'm allowed, I assume I'm allowed unless someone stops me. I will allow some questions, 3 questions from the audience, at least 3, and specify whom you are addressing the question to. And then if you have any other questions, you can discuss. We are here today and tomorrow. I am sure my panelists are still here today. So let's have the first 3 questions. You put your hand up, and I don't know if there's a roving microphone. So my okay, good. There's somebody there. I don't know. Stand up. Yeah, stand. If it's you, near the door. Simama and you, okay. Can you please say your name, where you come from, and make the question not a lecture, just a question straight, specific, and whom we are addressing the question to.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Charles Orek. I work at the Murang'a University of Technology in the Department of Agriculture. I would like to ask Professor Munavu. He has said that as a solution to these global challenges, research is key. Prof, I agree. But with the vast experience that you have in the industry, carrying on and having been very successful, what are some of the biggest challenges that you have encountered when it comes to research funding in Kenya, in Africa, but maybe you can tell us about in Kenya specifically? Why is our research that we carry on, that today we proudly exhibit here, are not making any impact to address some of these
Thank you. He will
challenges.
answer. Why are we
Thank
not
you.
our research funding? Next.
Asante.
Just answer your question. Give that.
Thank you very much. I'll be so brief. My name is Dr. Elizabeth from Dedan Kimathi University, a PhD alumni of Mawazo Institute. So the question I have is, and this is for all panelists, I'm glad to learn that you've done a lot of community engagements in your research projects and activities. So do you have any of your works that develops or brings out an application that is digital? And if not, do you feel like you require support from experts like us who can just come now and try to develop digital applications specifically geared towards commercialization, so that as you do the research...
Digital
nice.
and commercialization.
Nice.
Wamesikia. The last one, just ask your question. Don't elaborate on the question. This young man here. Okay, allow for, I see she's looking very sad, that lady. In red, yes. Okay, ask your question. Just say your name and ask the question. Don't elaborate on the question, please.
Okay, my name is Simon Lucalo. I'm here to represent an NGO you're just setting up, Research to Empower. So my question is, I have a diverse set of questions, but I'll try to intersect it. I'll try to intersect it into one. Of AI, have you developed like AI models specific to Africa or specific to the situations that you're handling, to or AI or predictive models to handle the issues on data quality? And also my another question is that you have all talked about the different sectors you're handling and the different areas you're trying to solve problems. But I really haven't heard of the intersection of different areas to solving a problem, because I believe that some of the problems that we are facing currently are intersectional problems, in that in as much as you may be working as an society...
intersectional problems, Lucalo Nisawa.
Yes.
They've asked, you want to ask one question, but I've given you 1.5 questions. We can discuss those ones later during break time. We have to keep time. Give that lady, I don't know her name. I saw her looking very sad when I skipped her and she looked down. Just ask a question, please, straight.
Thank you so much. My name is Dr. Sum Susma from Masinde Muliro University of Science and Technology. I have 2 questions. One,
please ask one question.
Yes. How do we handle inequalities that promote or frustrate Human Development Index? This one goes to Professor Munavu. And one last question goes to Professor Obare under innovation. Valuing intellectual property of our innovators. Do we have tools to value the innovations as we cost them? Thank you.
Doctor, you know, if you are in my class, I would have failed you. I said that's a question you asked too, but anyway, it's okay. You are not in my class, so it's okay. Now, we are going to have the panelists address any of those questions as you address briefly, 1 minute each, because we are beyond the time, and then give your closing. Your parting shot. Just answer whatever you are supposed to answer and give your parting shot. And the last parting shot will come from our keynote speaker. So start from that end. Just answer what you need to answer from these questions, if you are able to answer, and then give your parting shot. 1 minute each. Thank you.
I didn't get the question that was specifically directed to me. I had something like value chain. So maybe if it is clarified, I'll come back to it. With regard to commercialization, yes, we do have products that are being commercialized, and particularly with regard to seed production. I mean, you might have heard about bean seeds that have been bred through breeding from Egerton University. I think to your question, yes, and those products, innovative products, are being commercialized. Data quality, well, we do conduct research, and research that is normally conducted follows a certain protocol. And these protocols ensure the data that are collected are of high quality. Thanks.
Go ahead, Mutoro. please.
So in terms of, I'll take the digital applications questions. One of the things that we're trying to do in the process of developing a food rescue and redistribution system is to develop an app that can then be used to link people who have excess food to vulnerable populations. So that's something that we are piloting at the moment. We don't have a prototype yet, but it's something that we are working on. And on the question on challenges, research challenges, I would say one major challenge is communicating evidence to a larger audience. We tend to stick to scientific jargon, and that only that information ends up being accessed to the limited audience, and therefore whatever research that or whatever evidence we generate does not then transform into action, because the people who can actually implement the actions do not understand what we are actually seeing. In terms of parting shot, I would say the challenges that we are facing at the moment are systemic, and we need to work together with different stakeholders, even people that we have not potentially considered working with, in order to come up with sustainable solutions to the global challenges that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Muna?
Okay, thank you. I think I would want to address the issue of digitization. Yes, as we work on the issues of food security, some of our innovators have developed some apps that they can able to use, and they are selling to the market. We have one called Teklima. This one is able to sense the amount of water in the soil, so you don't need to overuse water when you are irrigating. We also have another one called Shaba Solutions, and they have developed a kit that can be able to analyze the quality of the soil. Within 15 minutes, you have your results, and you can then be able to make decisions on what you need to do. So these are technologies out in the market, and they are now trying to package them and start selling them. In terms of parting shot, I would want to say that even as we look at the solutions, we need to capitalize on the indigenous knowledge, our local knowledge. I see a big gap there, and I think it's an opportunity that we have harness this information, because the people with the knowledge are passing away very fast. So we need this knowledge documented, because it is a very hard day, especially when it comes to the issues of resilience and adaptation to climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. Daktari.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think just briefly on the tech, in the last 15 years, within our research, and also demand from some of the key people within our research collaboration, is demanding for harnessing the digital technology. I think currently I don't work on any app, but I think I can tell you there are very clear demand for app in the early warning space, basically in our climatic prediction and how we disseminate. Of course, there is also demand in the livestock commercialization or product commercialization. We have few service providers, but I think we haven't cracked that, because at national level, we still have this traditional way of managing livestock movement, demand specification, supply, all those things still require somebody like you to come up with that. Lastly, I think on the data quality, as Prof said, I think it's largely started with the originator of the data using specific protocol. Every institution has a protocol, but I think I can tell you there are critical issues around storage, manipulation, and how that data is used over, especially if you're using a longer term where data has to be updated for you to, could be climatic issue, could be food security issue. All those areas, it still has, a big issue that need to be considered.
Thank you so much. Professor Munavu, there was one question for you, and then you give your parting shot, both in 1 minute. It's hard to harass a senior professor who is your mentor, but just do your best. I will not push further, but please give us your wisdom.
Research funding. I think there was a question about research funding in Kenya. Let me tell you that we have relied too much on exchequer. I think it is time that we must really broaden resources for research and involve the private sector. Secondly, researchers focus too much on publication. It is time that we must now say it is research which is solving a specific problem. That is where you bring researchers on board. We committed as a nation that by now we should be giving 2% of our GDP to research. The percent now, I understand sometimes it ranges from 0.6 to 0.8. But unless we increase that, and unless we persuade the private sector to come on board so that we can be answering specific questions, then it will be problematic. I think that is extremely important. The other thing is that research in terms of collaboration. We do research in silos. Let's collaborate with other institutions, ILRI, Egerton, and so forth. We can collaborate and work jointly. I think this is a very important thing for me as we move forward. Thank you very much.
So thank you. Before you clap, I'll tell you how to clap. Thank you so much, the panelists. What we need to do before I wrap it up, let us give them 5 factorial claps. You remember? And if you clap off the line, you will be given supplementary. So let's do 5 factorial claps. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, start. Hakuna supplementary. So let me conclude this session. This morning, we were late, 30 minutes late. That's where I start. So check on that. 30 minutes lost cannot be recovered. But after that, starting at 9, we are finishing a bit late, and I excuse myself because time is of essence. So I want to conclude like this. We got a keynote presentation that joked our mind. We identified what are the main global challenges. And then we have been trying to see what are we doing? What is each one of us doing in these global challenges? They are global, then they translate into personal challenges. And we said that challenges is an opportunity. For each challenge, there is an opportunity. So always look for the opportunity in the challenge. So way forward is, from today, when you live here, everything you do, you make sure that you are contributing to the solutions to any of those challenges I read you. There are a number of them, climate change, food, and so on. So make sure you are contributing to it. Opportunity to moderate this very important session. Asante sana and have a good day. Thank you.
Another round of applause for Professor Mary for the good work done. Thank you so much. We really appreciate all the panelists. And we request you do a photo as we step down from the podium. You do a photo. All the panelists stand. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much once again. And now we'll be transiting into our next session. And the next session is research capacity strengthening, unpacking the realities. And now I want to welcome into the podium Emerin Skinner to start off the next session. Emerin? Yeah, welcome.
I'd like everyone to just stand up, shake yourself, get a bit of energy. We need a bit of energy in the room. Stand up, have a shake, move around, say hello to your neighbour. This session, we have an hour to look at issues around research capacity strengthening. You can sit down again now if you freshen up. We want to make this a really interactive, engaging, participatory session. We've got a really exciting lineup for you with some great speakers who are going to share their journeys, what they have done to be involved in the research capacity strengthening ecosystem. But really, we want to hear from you. So we have set up a Slido poll. The slight challenge is that the internet is not great in this room. But please open your phones. If you've got mobile data, even better, because the Wi-Fi is not that strong here. And hopefully it's going to go up on the screen. You just need to sign up for the session, RCS, for Research Capacity Strengthening 2024. Hopefully you can access that. And we will be coming back to the poll throughout the next hour and trying to get your input. We will be using it to find out about your engagement with research capacity strengthening. What are you doing? What's your understanding of it? And also to get your feedback and questions. We'd really want to get you to challenge our speakers today to come up with some really good questions. And we will have a live Q&A where you can not only put questions, but you can also vote. So if somebody else has asked a question that you think looks interesting, you can vote on it. It will go up to the top. So we hope to get lots of feedback from you in the room. The format of today's session, we've got a short 60 minutes, which is not enough to cover this exciting topic, but we hope at least to get a dialogue started, which we can then continue after today. My colleague Jordan, sorry, I should have introduced myself. I'm Emmeline Skinner from the East Africa Research Innovation Hub at the British High Commission here in Nairobi. I'm accompanied by my colleague Jordan, who will be coming up here in a moment, to give you a bit of an overview of what is research capacity strengthening, what do we understand by this term, and what does it look like in practice. And we will be using the next hour to really explore some of the challenges and opportunities around RCS here in Kenya and beyond. The format of the session will be a short presentation from Jordan. Then we've got 4 amazing speakers who will be coming up to talk about their own experiences in research capacity strengthening. Then we're going to come back to you to get your questions and your ideas. And finally, we're going to end with closing remarks from our chair of NRF, the director of NRF, Professor Dixon. So without further ado, I am going to ask, have you all managed to log in? If you have, please, can you answer the first question? We want to understand what your perception and understanding of research capacity strengthening is. If you could use one word, what you think it means, please put that up, and we're going to make a bit of a word cloud which will start forming as Jordan speaks. So I hope you can all get into that, and we'll show the word cloud at the end of the next little bit. So over to Jordan.
Thanks, Emmeline. I hope I see a few people. We all got the QR codes. We all got the QR code? Excellent. So I'll move to the next slide. So as Emmeline said, my name is Jordan Kiongo. I head the East Africa Research and Innovation Hub at the British High Commission. And my task this morning is quite simple, actually. It's just to set the scene for the conversation that we're about to have over the next couple of minutes. And I'll do it in 3 slides, but with one story to start with, which is real, but very short as well. I have a friend, I'll keep his name and details around him anonymous. He's a brilliant chap. He's Ivy League educated. He founded and leads a research and consulting company that's based in Nairobi. And he does brilliant work across the continent on research. Last year, he decided to do his PhD. So he registered at a local university, and despite being the lead of that organization, he was able to, maybe request for some water, sorry, my Thank you. So despite him leading the organization, he was able to register for his PhD and attended all his classes. And then he finished them and was now just waiting for a letter to start his project work. He waited for that letter for, I think, 8 months. It never came. Didn't get any support from his supervisor, and eventually gave up on his PhD at the local university and started applying to do his PhD outside the country. So he got accepted into an international university, went through all the paperwork, and had to convince the people in his organization that he has to leave, so he got guys to take over his roles while he was away. And then he applied for a visa to the university that is abroad. And last month, as he was doing the tests, his TB test was 50-50. So he was told, we can't give you the visa until we are sure. And it's going to take cultures, and it will take 3 months before we do that. He had already pulled his kids out of school and stuff like that. So right now he's waiting to know whether he'll make it or not. But that's a real life experience of people in terms of just their journey in terms of getting trained as researchers and doing good research in this continent. So today we want to speak on research capacity strengthening. And I really like this definition of research capacity strengthening because it covers a number of things. The first one is that I won't read it in detail, you can have a look at it, but I just want to focus on the fact that it involves strengthening both the ability and the resources that people need to be able to do research well. And this involves undertaking the research, communicating it, using it. It needs to be high quality, and it needs to be effective and be used sustainably. The 3 levels that are highlighted in the definition are what I'll focus on for now, is individual level and environmental level, or systemic level, if you may. These 3 levels are highly interconnected and dependent on each other. And anything that happens at one level will affect something at another level. For example, like the example I just gave you, so the guy is a brilliant person, he's extremely brilliant, but his challenge is that the system at his institution failed him, but also in the environment in terms of being able to be mobilized, having good supervisors and stuff like that. But the same can apply also downwards. You can have someone who's extremely brilliant, or systems at work, but because you don't have people that have been trained, then they're not able to do research and take it up. So just to set the scene for the people who are coming to speak next, this is how you can look at it. So at individual level, we are talking about training for individuals. So looking at junior, mid-level, or even senior researchers and the training that they get to be able to be good researchers. At institutional level, you're talking of research institutes, academic institutions, but also a network of organizations as an example. And here you're looking at the environment in which they operate. So the ability for them to have the facilities, so whether it is reagents, equipment, and stuff like that, but also the incentives for the staff who work in these institutions, but also the ability to raise funds, to manage those funds when they raise them, just the ability to be able to be effective in what they do, and the collaboration to be able to collaborate with people in another country, which is what we would really work. And the panel here talked about
48 of you have already put your ideas up, and we're getting a really beautiful cloud forming, which if the internet will allow, we will put up on the screen, but hopefully you can see it on your phones otherwise. Very interesting. The top things that are coming out are around funding and training, which is really, this is interesting because I think we're going to discuss a bit more today, like what else is RCS, because I think we often think research capacity strengthening is just about training individuals or about looking for funding, but as I hope you'll see through today's presentations, we want to look at a lot broader issues around how do we build a more enabling environment for research capacity, what does it mean at institutional level, what else is RCS. So the cloud is continuing to grow, but I'm going to open our next question, which is a question for each of you in the room. We'd really like to know about how are you engaged with research capacity strengthening? Are you a researcher who has benefited from some kind of support, institutional support? Are you in an organization, a university, a research center, a funding body? Are you working at the institutional level? We've got up. Are you able to show the cloud quickly before the poll? I don't know if you can project it just so everyone can have a look at it. Or are you working at the system level, which means are you involved in the kind of policy side, trying to create a more enabling environment? Are you working at government level? We'd really like, there's our cloud. You can see some really interesting questions coming up here, but really funding and training at the problems, but other issues around mentorship and structures, support, data, collaboration. Hopefully we'll be touching on all of these issues today. So if you could now go to the next question, which is around how you're engaged with, I'm just going to put that there, it should be up there, your engagement with research capacity strengthening. We really want to kind of get a bit of a picture of, in the room, who's here, what are you working at, and to find out, are we all engaged at these different levels that Jordan has described. I'm going to pass back to Jordan to introduce our speakers, but the poll will remain open. Once we've collected data on this, we're going to open the Q&A, and as you're listening to the speakers, if something comes up, you've got a question for one of them, please feel free to enter it into the Slido Q&A so that at the end of our speeches, you'll be able to come back and we can pick out the most interesting questions to go back to. Thanks.
Thank you, Emmeline. So to start us with, at individual level, I'll introduce the people here are a brilliant set of panelists. I think my only regret for this group is that we do not have a young person, so apologies for that. But next year we will bring a young person. Charles, I know you want to claim to be young, but I think there are people here who would refute that. But so they are my friends, they're all our friends and partners, so I won't get into the details of their CVs because they're quite long. But to start us off will be Dr. Charles Nyaigoti, who's a senior scientist at, just feel free to come up, at KEMRI, and he has very kindly agreed to, you can switch to the first presentation, please, who has very kindly agreed to take us through his journey as a researcher. I first heard his story last year. Was it last year in November? And it's very fascinating. So I won't take his time and let him come up and just talk through his journey over the next 10 minutes or less, and then we'll move to the next person.
Good morning, everyone, and I'm very delighted that the team considered giving me a chance. I thought it's because I'm a young scientist, but just that correction is an important reminder to me that actually I'm no longer still young. So my name is Dr. Charles Nyaigoti. I work at the KEMRI Wellcome Trust Research Program. This is based in Kilifi. And I'm very delighted that today I'm going to tell you a bit of my story on how I found myself today here speaking to you. So if I look back, those three pictures which I've shown there, and there is the saying that goes that picture can tell 1,000 words. I think those are 3,000 words on the slide. The first picture actually just gives my story on my place of birth back in Western Kenya, where I was born to a family of 33. I'm actually the youngest on the picture, and this was a peasant, subsistent farming family, and that's what we depended for what we was used to educate us. But at that point again, in a family of that three, not all of us actually met to our 50th birthday, and that was quite a concern that disease was quite eminent in our setup. And that really strengthened my solution that I should one day become part of the solution to this sort of a problem. The second picture shows me right immediately after campus, the tall middle guy there. This is myself joining the team at Kilifi in 2007. And next to me is my mentors, who at that time were Professor Knox and Dr. Charles Sunday. And the third picture shows myself giving information to the public. In this case, actually, the Kilifi County Governor, trying to tell them more about the COVID pandemic, which was in our midst at that time, trying to tell what the setup we have at the KEMRI Wellcome Program, what response we can give, and how we can help kind of roll back the pandemic, which was quite a scary thing at that point. But where did it all start? Back in 2002, I decided to join the University of Nairobi, having qualified to be sponsored by the government of Kenya. And immediately after finishing my bachelor's degree, that was in Chiroma, I did actually encounter Professor Munafa at that point. I took up a research opportunity on training in research methods. That's what we call an internship in 2007 at the KEMRI Wellcome Trust Research Program. Following which, I got an opportunity to study a master's course in London, in the University of London, for a year. And this was quite a surprise for me, because at that point my belief was master's takes at least 3 to 4 years. But that was quite quick and told me actually a lot could be done in a short time. On returning back to Kenya, I decided to take up a PhD opportunity sponsorship, which had come through KEMRI Wellcome Trust Strategic Award, which was given by the Wellcome. And that I finished in 2014, following which I took up a postdoc position within the same team I was working in for a 2-year period. This is under Professor Knox, who had just a keyword, a Senior Investigator Award. Following this, I had to start practicing or start getting some independence for myself. And that's when I applied for the Mid-Career Fellowship, which was supported by the Initiative to Develop African Research Leaders. At this point, actually, it was a collaboration of Welcome with other institutions supporting a number of programs across Africa to enhance capacity building. At the end of the Mid-Career Fellowship is when the pandemic occurred. And at that point, we had a grant, again, affiliated to my mentor, Professor Knox, which was supported by Wellcome Trust and FCDO. And this was primarily about COVID pandemic response in the country. And more recently, in 2022, I secured a Career Development Award from Wellcome. This is quite a very competitive scheme. Not many actually have been won in Africa, and this, following my rich experience and environment, I was able to convince the panel to award us to, so that we can do some research on investigating respiratory virus reinfections. Currently, I'm leading a research group at Cambridge, and I'm a group leader. I'm an independent scientist. I'm at the moment engaged in trying to source funding to actually now ask even further questions. But I'd like to just give a brief summary of some of the achievements I have had. And perhaps this is actually not really to just indicate what is possible when you have such a journey. Definitely key importance, I'm a research scientist, and some of the key achievements have to be around research. For instance, at the time that we're having COVID in the country, there were very few people who had expertise in respiratory virology. I had worked in that area for very many years, and I was able to step up quite quickly and set up diagnostics and genomic surveillance within the country. And this really ended up supporting the variant surveillance, which became a really important element of responding to the pandemic later on. Importantly also, I've been involved in a number of disease outbreaks. For instance, you will remember recently we had a red eye illness, and everybody was imagining, what could this be? Is it adenovirus? Is it some chlamydia, or is it some allergy? But at the end, we were able to work it out to have been caused by Coxsackie virus A24, which is quite unknown. At the moment, you're trying to step up our capacity to be able to respond to the imminent Mpox epidemic in Africa, which has been declared a public health emergency of international concern. But importantly also, in that journey, we have been able to I've been able to co-author more than 80 publications. The second achievement is around supervision. Right from people who are coming off campus, who we call postgraduate diplomas. I've supervised 9 of them, 14 people who have completed their MSc, and 2 PhDs who have completed and 2 PhDs who are currently ongoing. And lastly, the other achievement I'd like to highlight is the grants awarded, starting with the Mid-Career Research Fellowship, which I got through Delta's program, through AAS, and at that point it was delivered to me by Ideal, together with the Career Development Award, which I got from Wellcome, and also more recently, a National Institute of Health and Care Research, which has awarded another grant to do virus genomics for outbreak response. So I like to really highlight 3 things. What has enabled me to travel this journey? And importantly, I think, is the environment. I finished my campus when Cambridge Wellcome Trust program had just constructed a really state-of-the-art facility at Kilifi. Quite a rural place, which I couldn't imagine to see such a kind of facility, which I've displayed there on the slide. But importantly, at the same time, it was not only the building, but there was also a program to nurture local scientists. And that's when I was taken up as a research intern. There were mentors who were ready to see somebody who is, I can say, clueless as far as research is concerned, grow up and become an independent researcher. Importantly also, Cambridge is not working in isolation. It's quite connected to a number of institutions outside of Kilifi. And you might say Kilifi is quite rural, but we have collaborations with Oxford, we have collaborations with Warwick University, we have collaborations with IRI, we have collaborations with Imperial. So it's truly a multinational organization which is based in a very local environment. The second one I like to say is actually about mentors. Somebody has to believe in you. Just like somebody believed me, I have to thank Jordan and Tim who organized me to come here. Somebody has to believe that actually you have a story to tell. And at the point I was starting my journey, I remember I went to Cambridge. From Cambridge headquarters, I met Dr. Amadi, who I told him I don't know even how to hold a pipette. But he said, come on, you'll be trained how to do it. And then I was taken upon by Professor Knox, who has seen me through most of my career till he retired sometime this year, early this year, and has seen me, my journey grow. Professor Sam Kinyanjui, who was leading the strategic award and later the ideal award, which nurtured me during my mid-career fellowship. But also some people from very far, for instance, Professor Eddie Holmes, who is a world-known virologist in Australia, who has kept in touch with me through my career. He's always telling me, you're doing fantastic work. I'd like to see you move to the next level. And finally, Professor Philip B. John, who was really critical and instrumental in, for instance, my application for the Career Development Award from Wellcome. You have to really know what's going on. How do you put your proposal in such a good way that it has a chance in front of the panel and be ahead of the several others across the world who are also looking for the same opportunity. Lastly, the third consideration I think which is really important is funders. I think there has to be money for you to do research. There has to be somebody who is willing to put something into you. Importantly, in this case, I have to say my journey has been 60 to 70% supported by Wellcome. And this has been very generous support, right from the internship scheme to the strategic award to the mid-career level to now actually when I've been funded by Wellcome with over £2 million to do research on respiratory virus reinfection. That is really not the sort of budget that somebody can give you if they don't really are available to you for your mentorship and they believe in you. Importantly, we have others, NIHR, which has supported now our capacity building for genomics. We have had interaction with Mantle Foundation, Cambridge, and also importantly, in 2021, at the height of the pandemic, I used to be on a part-time position, but now I've been absorbed by the government to support research in the country. So I think that's also a very important thing that nationally also there is recognition, appreciation of our researchers. So what's the future as far as I'm concerned? I think it's now about developing others. As I've been reminded this morning, I'm no longer young, and I agree actually, looking at my head, it doesn't look very black, it looks now grayish. Really important then actually is that how can I use the position I have as the group leader of pathogen epidemiology and omics group to develop others. The group currently has about 50 members. It's supported by its own funding, but we need to sustain that. Applying for grants is not very easy. This includes actually now nurturing talent, taking in PhD students who are mentioned, master students, PhD students, to mentor them so that they can also travel the journey I have traveled. So my vision is generally to lead an international research group which is doing cutting-edge research in East Africa, but relevant globally so that we can provide solutions to human problems and improve human health. Thank you.
Brilliant. Please give him another round of applause. Yeah. So thank you. So from a pineapple growing young boy to pandemic responding researcher at a global level. So we then move to the next person, and I'm very privileged to invite Sylvia Mwendia to the stage. She's a program officer at Mawazo Institute, and she's going to talk us through some research that they have done at Mawazo that looks at the status of African women in research, so going beyond Kenya to a lot of countries across the continent and the nuances that are there for female researchers on the continent. So please welcome warmly Sylvia on stage. She looks younger than Charles, I think.
Thank you so much, Jordan, and I hope after this presentation we can demystify what youth looks like, exhibit A, myself here, and also what... Oh, apologies. I was just saying thank you for that, Jordan. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here, and I hope after this presentation we can demystify what youth looks like, exhibit here, and also what academic youth looks like, especially for African women researchers. All right, so to start off, good morning, everyone. I hope we are excited and ready. As Jordan has mentioned, I am Sylvia Mwendia of the Mawazo Institute, and I'll be taking you through what individual level perspective. Thank you. Now? Much better? Perfect. Great. Thanks for that. Yes, I'm Sylvia Mwendia of the Mawazo Institute, and I'll be taking you through the individual perspective of research capacity strengthening from the vantage point of African women, Karibuni. So before we go into that, a small background on Mawazo Institute and what we do. We are a women-led organization, and we support African women researchers who are innovating to solve a myriad of development challenges on the continent. We do this through two main programs. We have a 15-month fellowship program, providing capacity development, mentorship, and funding. We also do have the Voices program, the more public-facing, where we aim to give voice and visibility to the work of our fellows and alumni. We do research, public engagement, strategic partnerships, and communication. And our vision is to have a world whereby the voices and big ideas of African women are shaping the future of not only the continent and the world. All right, so moving along, just to set the scene, there you can see some research on what the landscape of research looks like within which African women are operating. We know that academic leadership and roles for women in the country are limited, and this is despite the key role women play in development. We have been seeing increasing enrollment, university enrollment, over the past few years, but still have a paltry 33.5% researchers on the continent, and this underrepresentation continues in the STEM fields and subsequently in leadership in institutions of higher learning. So what is the purpose of this report? What we are trying to do with the report is to understand the status of African women in research, highlight their experiences as researchers on the continent. Why, you may ask? What we really wanted to do was to highlight the need for very targeted, niche, and specific initiatives that are able to meet their unique needs and challenges. And to top it all off, we really do want to foster an inclusive research environment. Now, just tapping into the demographics of this study, it is continental. We had two main quantitative data sources. The first one is the 2023 Academic Needs Survey. This is a survey we conduct internally at Mawazo to better understand the needs of women researchers, and it is distributed along our Mawazo Fellowship application when we are launching the call. From the data, you'll see that there were 1445 completed surveys, the majority of which came from outside of Africa, but we only considered the surveys from within Africa for analysis. And we'd also like to exercise caution when it comes to analysis of these preliminary data. As you can see, there is a report from East and West, so countries such as Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa. Our second quantitative data source was from the 2023 Mawazo Fellowship data. And this is obtained during the call for application for actually our current cohort. Those are the numbers of submitted applications. It is continentally representative with 28 countries. In fact, top 6 countries formed 74% of the applications. And again, when it comes to the top countries, we do have the usual bigwigs, Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa. When it comes to the methodology we use, it was a very mixed method approach. We had both quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative, we're able to statistically analyze the data of 2 data sources mentioned in the prior slides, and we're also able to come up with 4 key themes, which we'll mention as we go along. When it comes to qualitative analysis, what we did, we employed an ethnographic approach whereby we were able to conduct in-depth interviews. We had open-ended questions. We also had semi-structured questions, and really just got our alumni and our beneficiaries to share their PhD life stories. All right, now just going to the summary of our key findings. The first one is access to funding opportunities. Just to set the scene, we are aware, speaking to researchers, how fundamental funding is to African Challenge. We've had it mentioned in the previous sessions, and this is due to reasons such as lack of transparency in availability of fundings, lack of expertise, you don't know where to find it, and the situation is even worse for women, whereby there is a correlation between lack of PhD funding and how long it takes African women to graduate, or rather to complete their PhDs. As you can see from the data we collected, we only had 34% of the applicants who were able to secure funding, the top of which was in Eastern Africa at 13%. Additionally, as you can see from the data there, we also had 71% of the applicants reported high impact on the lack of access to funding. And if we are to aggregate this further, looking at age, we had 82% of women over 50 reporting a high impact. So again, we are seeing also the age component and what it means to be an quote-unquote older women researcher and how they are affected. Still on opportunities to funding, looking at the most funded thematic areas, as you can see, they are all in the area of STEM, looking at life and health sciences, agriculture, and food security. Perhaps to provide a bit of background, when we are talking about thematic areas, we had 8 thematic areas, which we posed as a question to the applicants. And these were the top 3, which are the most funded. These 8 thematic areas, they emanate from an internal research we did in 2022 called the Emerging Trends in Research Report. And the basic idea behind this was to better understand what are the priorities when it comes to research on the continent, what are the trends, and this was all in a bid to better help and support our fellows. Another reason we inferred when it comes to majority of the funding being in the STEM area is that where STEM features also strongly, where African institutions provide a variety of core and applied sciences. And when we were looking at the least funded, at the bottom was mathematical and physical sciences, education, and IT. Another key finding was research mobility. What we're looking at here is the researchers' capacity to be able to relocate and engage their academic activities in different locations or institutions or countries. So it's a movement not only of themselves, but also of their work. Why look at research mobility? We were able to find that academic achievement is often evaluated through global, regional, and collaborative efforts. As also we've had it being mentioned, the need for collaboration. And this collaboration is not possible with research mobility. When we're looking at the data, you'll find that majority of the applicants or African women researchers, they are studying in their home country at 79%. Kenya led this at 24%, followed by Nigeria. You'll also find that those same countries, they also did have the highest number of non-native Africans studying in those countries. However, there's a bit of good news. There still is some research mobility across the continent at 21%, but still very low numbers. And we only had 35% of applicants reporting a high impact on their ability to collaborate. I'd also like to point you out to South Africa, which did have the most, from our data, the most diverse number of applicants in terms of the number of students who are studying in South Africa and they are not native to the land, standing at 16. Right. Moving on to our next key finding, academic support. Here we have supervisors, mentorship and career guidance, research and academic skills, academic writing and publishing training. Again, I don't think the importance goes without a doubt. We also found that academic support is highly linked to productivity and research experience. Again, looking at some of the data, for instance, when it comes to quality writing and publishing training, you'll find that 17% reported having not received training in this area, which is quite daunting. The majority reported having received medium quality training, and this came from Central Africa at 53%. When we're looking at the impact of preparing a paper for publishing, again, there was also largely a medium impact at 37%, and 35% reported a high impact. Still on academic support and specifically diving into mentorship and career guidance, which, if my memory serves me correct, came up quite prominently on the word cloud. Our data indicated that 38% report a high impact to the lack of access to mentorship and career guidance. And if we are again able to aggregate this in terms of age, again, older women are more impacted, and regionally, Southern Africa is the area which reported the highest impact on lack of access to mentorship and career guidance. Again, some of the challenges that older women do face, and here we're looking at the age group of 50 plus years, whereby 77% reported encountering challenges when it comes to these key findings, mentorship and career guidance, training, and academic skills. Now, moving on to gendered experiences, this was our fourth key finding, and here we were looking at the lived experiences, the impact of gendered responsibility, sexism, and misogyny in the PhD journey. We're also looking at what limitations are brought about by gendered ageism and disability. Again, just highlighting some of the data there. When it comes to gendered responsibility, I'd like to draw your eyes to the age group of 35 to 39 years, whereby they reported the highest impact of gendered responsibility at 26%. Additionally, we had also aggregated this data when it comes to caregiver status. So if you are a researcher and if you're a caregiver, they reported the highest impact of 26% when it comes to the gender responsibility, and this was 5% compared to those who are not caregivers. When we're looking at sexism and misogyny, it goes without saying higher education institutions are still highly and intrinsically gendered, so it's not shocking when these same systems are reproduced socially and culturally, and this is just continues the cycle of inequality. The region which was most impacted by sexism and misogyny, according to our data, was Eastern Africa, which reported a medium and high impact at 36%. And now, still on gendered experiences, this is again just drawing you back to the impact of misogyny, and this was some of the qualitative data we were able to collect. This is an experience from a fellow at Mawazo Institute. She's a Muslim woman. She was just explaining her experience being in the academy and some of the things she's had to face. And again, also just drawing you to that study by Faswana Mafuya of 2023, again, just indicating the impact of misogyny. And when this happens, you know, these are the implications where you have fewer university leadership and fewer women in STEM disciplines, you know, professorships and fellowships, they're not as many for women. And lastly, on gendered experiences, we found it very interesting. Our fellows told us through the data, we were able to analyze that their primary motivation for applying for the fellowship was a lack of funding. And this is just proof of the economic effect of gendered responsibilities on African women. We had them reporting how if some of them are raising kids in single-parent households, which sometimes translate to single-income households. Again, also the caregiving responsibility primarily falling on women, which also comes with associated costs. And also, what do these impacts look like in the long term for their education and economic status? So in conclusion, what were we saying with this, our status of African women in research? Unfortunately, we found what most of us already feared, that the situation is still very, very precarious for African women researchers due to those factors indicated there: gender stereotyping, lack of adequate and institutional support, lack of mentorship and career guidance. And what African women researchers really need is more attention from policymakers and academic institutions. And we really need to include African women researchers in these conversations, in these debates, so that they're able to tell us what they want and some of the sustainable solutions that can help them overcome these challenges in the research ecosystem. We also did receive some recommendations. We did have some of those solutions go such a long way. When it comes to age and demystifying, what does it mean to be an early career researcher or an experienced researcher? We should delineate. Something we are also taking to heart at Mawazo is to be able to share and support available resources, make sure it reaches places and communities and areas it would never reach, because this information is so important. And honestly, some people, they don't know where to access the information or how to access this information. So for the organization, you should also look outside of your bubbles and make sure these opportunities reach as far and wide as possible. All right, and thank you, and we hope to engage more after.
Request Charles to please join our on stage so that when we get to Q&A, we can do that. And then we'll switch gears a little bit now to go to beyond the individual level to institutional level capacity building. And I'll welcome a friend, Dr. Evelyn Gitao, who's the Chief Scientific Officer at the Science for Africa Foundation, has many years of experience in this space, way more than even I. So it's an honor to have you here. Please.
Thanks, Jordan, and thanks NRF and the British High Commission for having this session today. I don't know whether to complain to Jordan. When he started talking about youth, I was like, what does he mean? Until Charles came on board. So my journey and my passion for institutions is actually personalized, and I'll pick up from where Charles left off. So when Charles was joining the Kemry university actually, I was joining Kemry Welcome. 2002, the institution was really small. Sam will attest to the fact that we were in a house as researchers. That's where we were being trained. So most of our PhD training was done outside. I went to Liverpool in 2003 and came back in 2007, where the beautiful building that Charles showed was finally opened. My background is in chemistry and mass spectrometry. So I came back having learned all this new technology, cutting edge science, and I was so excited. I'm coming back to Kenya. I'm never gonna have to ship a sample to the UK ever again to do my research, right? So we come back and there was a room, and I say a room for mass spec in that lovely building in 2007. So that was 2007, and 2008 I still had to ship samples because we did not quite have the justification to buy $1 million equipment for that room. I finally got a mass spec at the Kemry Welcome program in 2014. So almost 7 years down the line, my room remained empty. I was quite good at not having squatters in that room, but it remained empty. So for me, there was always that passion to do the research that I'd been taught to do in Liverpool, in Kenya, but there was a barrier, the institutional barrier in terms of the equipment, in terms of getting reagents. the points around gender, it was still early days, and it's still part of the problem where we don't have institutional policies that can allow for women to thrive as much as they can. So it was developed and started a few years ago to strengthen and promote science and innovation on the continent. We believe that science and innovation has to be central for development on the continent. This morning we heard about SDGs and all these things that we're talking about, but we have to actually grow local to become as localized as we need to be to address our challenges ourselves. We work in terms of supporting institutions on the continent in various ways, through partnerships with the FCDO, with Welcome, and many of the institutions that have been mentioned by Charles this morning, where we're looking to support institutions to support the individual so that they can actually generate the research that we need to have to address the sustainable development goals. In terms of the work that we've done at individual level, and I started at Kenya because we are in Kenya, and it's always important to show that we're actually promoting work and science and research here in Kenya. We've supported researchers to publish, so over 600 publications can be attributed to funding coming from the Science for Africa Foundation. We have a lot of policy engagement that's happening with partners across Kenya. We have a lot of dissemination that's happening. We're making inroads into impact. So impact is where it is reaching and transforming the lives of the people that we are trying to make sure get addressed. And we also, in terms of supporting institutions, that IDEAL is partly funded by the Science for Africa Foundation, but just to mention just a little bit. But the fact of the matter is that we are really, really working hard to ensure that we support individuals. At the African level, the numbers just translate from what we have in Kenya, where we have the same type of engagement, the same type of output, and working very hard to increase the research institutions on the continent. So in Kenya, on the continent, we're now working in 36 African countries, as demonstrated there, with with countries from Tunisia all the way down to South Africa. There are a few barriers here and there in Central Africa that hopefully we'll be able to address as we go along. Now, Jordan knows I don't take long when I'm telling my stories, so actually, this is my last slide. But my last slide really is to talk about the things that have already come out at individual level that we passionately are trying to address. The peer learning and co-creation for local relevant science is really important. So in the morning when they talked about the fact that Kenya has not gotten to the 2% and we need to get to the 2%, are we ensuring that the science, that the research, and that the institutions that are working in research are addressing what the government would think is important? And these are things that we need to keep thinking about. How do we better engage Exchequer to understand? How do we capacitate Exchequer to demand the right research on the continent? So that's one level of institution, and I know Tom will come and speak about a little bit about the whole ecosystem and how we think about that. We have to balance science excellence with diversity, equity, and inclusion. The issues around women and gender are really about institutional policies and how we implement those. We did a research a few years back, we need to publish it a little bit, about barriers for women in science. What we found is that actually all African universities have very strong gender policies. Now, having the policy is one thing. Implementing it effectively is really, really the key to ensuring that the equity, diversity, and inclusion is happening as it should for women and for vulnerable populations. So this is where we start having the conversation around, is it financial that these policies are not being implemented as well as they should be? Or is it a culture that we need to change? And we all know culture takes long to change, and also culture eats strategy for breakfast. So, these issues around gender and inclusivity, more broadly, vulnerable populations being part of the solution for research, really, we need to talk about them. Focusing on strong research environments. I started and I said my room stayed empty for 7 years. It's pulled me out of the lab. And I'm okay and I'm happy that I'm not in the lab, but sometimes I do question the fact that I spent a lot of time in the lab passionate about the lab, but not getting the equipment that I needed. So these environments, we need to keep investing. You know, NRF are working very hard to make sure that they have the resources for Kenya to ensure that if we buy equipment in Kenya, in the universities, it's not equipment that will survive the grant cycle. So if you have 5 years, you buy a mass spec, after 5 years, do you have the resources to actually maintain that? Do you have the resources to get new technologies? We've just funded some grantees in artificial intelligence. That technology is moving so fast, it will need constant sustainable funding to ensure that we can capitalize on things like artificial intelligence. Fund management is a very, very, I don't want to call it a problem. I want to call it a gap that we have in many of our institutions, and as a result, we do not have the capacity to give more than $5 million to many of the institutions on the many of the institutions cannot absorb more than $5 million. So Charles is one researcher at Kemri Wellcome. If you look at what Kemri receives every year, they get, you know, in terms of grant funding, they're probably, and Sam could speak to that, about 20 to 30 million, but very, very few institutions on the continent can manage that and absorb that kind of money. So we need to improve how we manage funds in institutions to ensure that we can attract them, because we want to be able to come and give you the money, you can account for it, and every dollar for research goes into research. The exchequer wants to see a return on investment when he gives you his 2 shillings, because that's all he's giving you right now, but you need to be able to account for the little and a lot. Building trust. Partnerships and collaborations are all about trust, are all about managing power dynamics. We also do not want to build, you know, little colonialists within our ecosystem. You know, we talk about decolonization, thinking we're talking very much about north-south power dynamics, but then as we get very many strong institutions on the continent, there's that element of some of the strong institutions become the new colonizers. So we need to manage institutions in a way that partnerships and collaborations are really being enhanced in an equitable way and are not developing new unhealthy power dynamics. Science leaders. Charles is an example of the many science leaders that are coming out of strong institutions as they're being capacitated for that. And we need to ensure that these science leaders can stay in the institutions by making sure that structures, that pay, that the rewards they receive, the recognition they receive is commensurate to what they are doing. So you know, it's really exciting to see what Charles was talking about and how far his career has gone and how the organization has supported him. Value for money. It's been exciting walking through the pavilion this last 2 days for me, seeing what is coming out. And I keep asking myself, with the little that we're giving young researchers, giving institutions, we're getting a hint of what Kenya could really, really develop. So we're already demonstrating what value for money looks like, but we need to do better. We need to make sure that when we get the big money, that we're actually showing that that investment is working. And lastly, unfortunately, in Kenya and the African continent, we do not have the luxury of specializing and going in depth, being that physicist sitting in a corner waiting for the apple to fall, and you know, that luxury doesn't exist anymore. Multidisciplinarity is what we have to engage in. So for the universities here, I think how we teach, if you're teaching researchers to become innovators, you can't teach the same way. So we've got to change pedagogy a little bit. We've got to think about, is our curriculum addressing what we're teaching so that the young people coming out of the university are actually versatile enough to address the needs in an interdisciplinary way. So I promised I'll be short, so I'll stop there, but I hope this will trigger some conversations about how we can strengthen our institutions further. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gitau. We'll move to the next level, which is the funder level. But before we do, just to remind you that we have our poll up on Slido. So please go to it, and if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, just post it there, and Emmeline will come and read the questions after the next session. So to switch it up, we are moving now to reflections from someone who's been in the funding field for a while, and it's an honor to have Dr. Tom Karaoke, who's the founding director, but also the CEO of the Science for Africa Foundation. And as many of this similar to Evelyn, actually, he's been in this field for quite a while. And he's here to provoke us. I think that was part of the MO. But please put your hands together and welcome Dr. Karaoke.
I don't know whether it's your morning or afternoon. Thank you, Jordan, for leaving the youngest to talk last. So I'm delighted for that. I feel sometimes that I'm always on the annual calendar for Jordan. So thank you, and for NRF for the invitation. And I can see the CEO and the chair. And of course, one of our mentors from many years, Rafael Munafu. Good to see all of you here. I don't want to go to revisit everything that has been said by everybody, and thanks Evelyn for really capturing exactly what it is that we do at the Science for Africa Foundation. But I have a few areas of emphasis. At the center of everything is about people. And that investment that needs to be continued, sustained over and over for many decades, as demonstrated by Charles and Evelyn, that needs to be happening, because one of the biggest problems we have is this start investment, then you stop, and then you revisit it, and you start all over again. We're not going to build a critical mass of scientists and researchers and technologists if that is how we are going to train and inspire and provide career guidance in Kenya or across the continent or even globally. So one of the main things at the center of everything we do, one of our impact areas, as you saw from the data from Evelyn, is actually to track how people are actually being supported. And it was good to see the young people here, because some of us did not have that good level of mentorship. We kind of stumbled or staggered into science. That doesn't have to be the case for the young people. It's all about provoking them and making sure that they are driven by curiosity. And curiosity is at the center of young people embracing science. And it's also about telling them that they can make careers out of science. The way science is taught, the curriculums need to be challenged continuously all the time, so that they can see, you watch on TV and every young person is saying, oh, I want to become a lawyer, oh, I want to become a doctor. I don't hear many saying, I want to be a great scientist. So the conversations need to start to change, and you can only do that if you inspire them to do that. The second area that I would like to emphasize is the fact that the places of work, the institutions where science is done, science does not happen through luck. Okay, maybe occasionally. When you go through the history of science, then you might be reminded that you could be, I don't know, Einstein or, I don't know, Aristotle, and you are lying under a coconut tree and the coconut hits you on the head, and then you wreck a moment. I don't think science happens like that anymore. It's got to be somewhere where there's a conducive environment that allows you to get the ideas, move them along the way, all the way to become an innovation that can move forward. And so the places we work needs to happen. Institutions need to make more investment. And that's also why we feel we make more and more investment to strengthen, like Evelyn said, about the research environment itself, the grants offices, the research administration aspect. All of that needs to come together. The third area is products. Now, if we want to produce products, investment in discovery, we have to do that. But one of the biggest failures, including a place like Kenya, is asking that question: how much of that discovery we do is actually going through the transition phases? Some organizations do a better job of that. But if you think about one example, globally, there are $500 billion invested in clinical trials. Only about 4% of those come to Africa. That is a very small proportion of clinical trials, for many reasons. because our abilities to do that clinical trials and transitioning of that, other than some well-established universities, it's not happening. They don't have the capacity. And we have to build capacities for that. It's very interesting how, within the context of COVID, every politician knows how to say messenger RNA. But if you ask them what RNA stands for, of course, they will struggle to tell you what that is. But there is understanding that actually there are discoveries in science that actually end up being vaccines, which is why many of us are alive. That is why our children, every mother, parent takes their child within the first 2 years of being born is for them to get childhood vaccines. Discovery, transitioning, that is very important to get to implementation. The fourth area for me to emphasize our impact area is policies. Now, governments can do many things. They can make sure that the policy creates an enabling environment. Governments are some of the biggest consumers of innovation. So if a government wants to then provide social welfare or socio-economic development, they can use all kinds of innovations that come out of this. And innovations is not just about vaccines or new crops of varieties. It also includes tools and services that can come out of this creation through what we try to all do together. Governments sometimes can be very slow in doing this. I don't know how NRF you are doing in terms of getting consistent funding. I am not in the private public center anymore, so I can be very provocative about this. I won't receive a job to be sacked by tomorrow. But I think it's good to challenge our own governments. This business about 2% allocation of GDP, did the government define whether this is going to happen within 10 years, or are we talking about within 100 years? So that we can all be clear about how this is going to happen. So we need to challenge our governments. And my good friend, Kenyanju is sitting there, was saying the same thing. You hear a lot about investment being made into technologies, including big cars, but you don't do much about investment in science and innovation. So I think we have a role so that we don't just get pronouncements about what is being created, but we also actually see actionable things happening within those pronouncements. I have a few examples of governments that actually, at a Pan-African level, which I've actually been impressed with. Rwanda, we started doing some work with them to create what they call a Grand Challenges Rwanda, which is a good model to bring platforms for science. Immediately we signed an MOU with them. They put $1 million for some of the areas they wanted to start on year one. On year one. They did not make promises that will happen. They put $1 million immediately. Malawi is a small country, much, much poorer than Kenya. We are, I think, a lower middle income country. Malawi is a least developing country. They are committed to actually put a little bit more money into their research and development. Of course, Kenya, we know we put quite a bit of money, quite very significant money in Rwanda. The problem is it goes up and down all the time. And then I have also been impressed by what Ghana is trying to do. One of the challenges of scientists who are here is the fact that the tax incentives are not there for institutions. There is all kinds of bureaucratic handles for you to procure the inputs into your research laboratories or the work that you do. Government can do much in that area of making tax exemptions or incentives and making sure that the bureaucratic aspects of procuring is addressed in a much better way. Across the continent, there used to be a time when you're trying to go for a meeting and you need a visa and you cannot go into that meeting because visas are not being available. We need to do better than that as scientists. The final thing I would do is a little bit about partnership, because in my view, this is an area that we need to talk about equitable partnerships and what it means. Those who have the money does not mean that they are the ones who should be defining the agenda. That's part of what it is to have an equitable partnership. Money is at the center of it, but the people who lived the experiences on a daily basis, those who are at the local context are trying to solve those problems, are the ones who should be at the table to design the programs, to define the priorities, and to move forward in terms of decision making. Of course, those who provide money, like ourselves, we actually then emphasize on accountability because we are getting support from FCDO and Welcome and the Gates Foundation, so we must emphasize that aspect of accountability. We have accountability with those who receive the funding, we have accountability to FCDO and our global partners, so building those capacities, and again, that also addresses equitable partnerships. Then, of course, we have those institutions that we say, collaborations is also about equitable partnerships. If you say you have a hub and spoke model, the ones that are very strong also need to demonstrate as actually working in partnerships. We need to put all these, what we call the 5 Ps of our impact area: people, the places of work, the products that come out of that, the products that actually we have them, and also the equitable partnerships that can provide the environment in which we can see a thriving R&D ecosystem in Kenya and beyond. I hope this is going to be a conversation, and this is just the first one. And thank you very much to NRF and all the partners and the FCDU and the Research Hub for bringing all of that together to have this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll call Emmeline to come in and just lead us through a Q&A session. And just to remind you, please give us your contact details. As Tom has just said, this is the first of many conversations. We hope to do a couple of convenings either towards the end of the year or the beginning of the year to speak specifically about this and just deep dive into all of them. So please make sure that you share your contacts as well. But over to Emmeline.
Brilliant, thank you, and thank you to all our speakers. I think it's been a really fascinating session and really good to hear all your different perspectives. So thank you to all of you who have been posting questions. Can I ask IT team if you're able to post a Q&A on the screen? I think you can actually vote and select questions so we can see which ones are most popular, but I've been looking, getting a peek preview, and some really interesting things coming up. And I think if we've got a roving mic, we can pass it to people who've asked particular questions. A few issues have come up for our panel. One of them is about, in a constrained resource capacity environment, we've talked about individual, institutional, system level. Where should we prioritize? This is particularly a question for those of us funding. If we've got limited funds, where is the real urgency? How would you recommend that we prioritize? So I don't know if I can put that to, I don't know, should we start with Tom? Do you want to, any thoughts on that one?
This says push, but I'm pushing everything, but nothing is happening.
Is that not working? Everyone, if you'll speak, maybe
I have a big voice.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah. So I think everything functions, and so because you bring everything together. So I don't think there is one thing you can say is a priority, in my view, but I think what you could do is to say, who has the responsibility for what? So if, for example, if we say, we can provide ingredients to go into a research group to do their job. The spaces should be provided by the institution. And the institution actually, okay, I'll give you one example. So we had the opportunity to put $2 million to one of the research institutions in Ethiopia. And when we went there to do a due diligence, we quickly found out actually that they wanted to start building a bioinformatics platform. I think this is all about data. But they did not have the place where to house that place. And we were not going to make an investment in the spaces, the brick and mortar. However, they had already secured some funding directly from the government of Kenya. Government of Ethiopia, as we see also in many of our institutions are being built by from government. So I would say it's a division of labor, depending on how the entirety of R&D is being positioned by the country and the institutions and the individuals who are driving it.
Great, thank you. Any differing opinions on the panel? Anyone else want to come up with a... Please feel free to step in.
I'm not sure. Okay, that's good. I think it's on now. So we've spent the last, Welcome have been in Kenya for almost 60 years, 70 years, right? And they've spent a lot of time training people. And we have a lot of fellows, even as Science for Africa Foundation, that have been trained through us. The gap is that the institutions are not being developed at the same rate as we need to. So we keep having the conversation around brain drain, and it's going to continue if we don't focus a little bit more on institutional strengthening that allows the fellows that we are training, the researchers that we are training, to remain on the continent. So for me, I still say, even as we work on the ecosystem, the bigger systemic issues, the institutions need the strong capacity. So I get very nervous when we hear funding for higher education being cut across by governments, including our own. The governments asking the question, is research really relevant, and is higher education relevant? For me, I get really uncomfortable because we've trained a lot of people, but we're not actually giving them the environment. We're not improving the environments fast enough to keep them here. So I think that's where we should be focusing on now, and we will get a return on investment. All these students who are coming out, they're not going to all leave the country, but they're going to be jobless if we don't focus on the institutions. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Evelyn, come on. Sorry, Sylvia.
I hope it works. Okay, yes, not necessarily a differing opinion, but just to agree with my colleagues here, Daktari, when it comes to prioritizing funding at the individual level, it's just we need to be very deliberate that this funding is meeting the needs of the individual. Daktari so eloquently mentioned that those who have the money should not dictate the agenda, and so there also does need to be a flexibility on where this money is going without sacrificing accountability, and thereby when you are funding individuals, and something we also do incorporate at Mawazo, they are able to do more and meet their needs and actually excel in their research.
Great, thank you. And I'd like to follow up with you, Sylvia. There have been a couple of questions that have come up around issues around gender equality and social inclusion. One question around how do we make sure that research is actually involving underserved communities. I think there was something that came out in your report about a lot of research for science being funded. What about research that's working on less high priority medical research issues, for example, or research with underserved communities? What do we do to encourage more inclusion? And another question linked to that around female researchers struggling to access funding opportunities, I think for Evelyn and for Sylvia. What advice have you got for women who are in the minority and whose voice may be less powerful in the research ecosystem?
Right, thanks a lot, Emmeline. Perhaps starting with inclusion in underserved communities, and again, I'll speak to what I know and what we do at Mawazo. For instance, when we think about the research methods we are teaching, are they inclusive? One, in our fellowship, our 15-month fellowship, we do incorporate participatory action research, and even how can we innovate to make sure that we're not sticking to the same way and the same models of doing research? Are we researching in local languages? Are we researching in ways that these communities understand? Also, are we involving the communities, ensuring that this research is not extractive? So if you are in a capacity to deliver training, I think also that training and capacity development should ensure that we are diversifying how we are doing this. When it comes to inclusion beyond, perhaps beyond women, even when we are thinking about persons with disability in our cohort, in our fellowship application data, we actually had 17% of women who indicated that they do have some level of disability which affects their overall well-being, and one which came up was visual impairment. So even at Mawazo, we are constantly thinking about how do we make our call for application more inclusive when it comes to language, when it comes to the reach. Even events such as this, did we consider anyone who might be person with disability? Do we have interpreters? So I think it's a very it's a very wide issue, but those are some of the initiatives, and I'm thinking we do go about at Mawazo.
Great, thank you. Ethel, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, so one of the things I always think about when I think about gendered approach to policy making and gendered approach to building environments for women is how sometimes the policies we put in place could actually still hinder women from moving as fast as men. So Mawazo is one of the institutions actually I admire. They're the only ones who have equal maternity, paternity leave. I think they're the only organization in Kenya that are doing that right now, where both men and women get the same level. So the point I'm trying to make is, as we give women more time with their children, many will be very anxious that they're going to be left behind by their male counterparts. If you're a postdoc in the lab, like I was, I took my maternity leave as a postdoc for 6 months, with the recognition that anyone I graduated with my PhD was still going on. So how do we change society so that childbearing is an equal responsibility? It's not just on women. We're not there yet, but I think we need to start encouraging the gendered approach to childbearing, for example, not, child rearing, for example, so that responsibilities for children in this society are not just seen as a women-only responsibility. Because some of these things are holding us back, and we can do this at policy level. It's going to take, radical shift in how we work, how we as society think. But if we only encourage women to take more time off and come back, they're still going to be left behind. So I just want us to start thinking a bit radically about how we can encourage men to take some of the roles that are women-only roles. Kilifi, we used to see men bringing babies to the hospital. I used to actually admire that. I think it's the only society I have seen that happen across Kenya. But that was their responsibility. So if we can normalize some of these things, it would be really good.
Great, thanks. And Charles, you haven't spoken yet, but there's been a lot of interest in the questions and your journey. I think you really inspired a lot of people. It'd be great to hear from you, particularly people are asking, after you finish your doctorate, you're looking for a postdoc. That seems to be a real challenge for a lot of researchers, how to make that journey. And some interest also about how do they find out more about Kemri Welcome, people who are interested in this and would like to get more involved. So if you'd be happy to share it.
So I think... I'll say that it's important to think about what the next opportunity will be available for you once you finish one level. For instance, once you finish your PhD, what's going to be your postdoc. But I have also to say that sometimes actually that shouldn't be a big problem if you're really doing the job that you are supposed to do currently, because that tends to immediately get people actually interested in working with you going forward. So, to be very honest, in that case, then I'll really say there are opportunities. And I remember initially in the conversation was actually wherever there's a problem, it's an opportunity. So if still we have research questions that can be asked within our environment, I think the opportunity to find postdoctoral opportunities or mid-career level or even independent research level training still exists. I give an example. When I was about to finish my mid-career fellowship, I was wondering, what am I going to do next? But COVID was just sitting there next, waiting for me actually to transition over. And for instance, at the moment, we are having a potential monkeypox outbreak in Africa. Those are opportunities: vaccines, genomics research, social science around transmission of this virus. So I think there are, in a continent like this, I see very many opportunities. Actually, all we have to do is whatever we are doing currently, do it well so that we are relevant for the next opportunity.
Great, thank you very much. There are so many other interesting questions in there, and I know that those of you in the audience have all got more questions as well, but sadly we are out of time. So please do take the advantage to come and speak to our panelists after this session if you've got questions that weren't answered. And I'd like to close the session by inviting Professor Ndala, the CEO of the National Research Fund, to come and make some closing remarks. And thank you to all our wonderful panelists.
Thank you.
A word of thanks to our speakers. It's been really fascinating to hear from you. I'll not take much of your time because I'm in between you and your tea break. However, there is a question that has been hovering in my mind. We are talking of an individual and the ecosystem, but what about the home? Because I've had a chance to interact with small kids, young kids in Asia. They start matters research at that young age. And that is something that we should also try and emulate, because liking science, it doesn't happen when you've done with your high school. And as NRF, we've started the journey by bringing here the high schoolers so that they can interact with our seasoned scientists and researchers, and they can be proud to say that I want to be a scientist. And I was happy when Prof. Munavu was speaking to them, and I could see it in their faces. We can do. They are the future global leaders in matter science. Maybe key points to take home and from our speakers is we want sustainability. As NRF, we've been having issues with trickling in of funding. At times, the flow is in, and in the midway of doing your research, there's no fund, so you are forced to stop. And when you stop doing research, that motivation dies. And I know most of my colleagues here who've been funded by NRF, they still have pending funding. And it's a pain when you are about that discovery moment that there are no funding flows. The other thing that I also want to pick out from this is the aspects of inclusivity, and lastly, the issues to do with the indigenous knowledge, because when we were going through the stands, we've got a lady there who has been doing research with the indigenous knowledge, and she's not gone through any of this formal training, and they've been treating diseases. It's a matter of also policy that we need to have in place to ensure that they also are involved in matter science. Finally, as we probably come to the end tomorrow, I would wish to see, as we've been challenged by our guest of honor yesterday, we need to keep communicating the value of science to our stakeholders who may not understand what science is all about, apart from when Dr. Karuki said, if you ask a politician what is RNA, they may not have an idea, but if you talk in matters vaccine or treatment, they'll be able to get it right. With those few remarks, and I would wish to continue talking, I know through this leader there'll be questions that will be raised, and going into the future, we need to work with our partners to build a robust ecosystem that is going to ensure we are sustainable in matters funding RSTI, and more so in matters collaboration with within Africa and of course North and South. I'll call upon my speakers. We have a last group photo, and let's continue the discussion. And with that, I think tea is served, and we'll be back exactly in 20 minutes. I know you're running late for the next session. Thank you.